grandfather on my dad's side was an interesting dude. My dad told me one time, crazy dude came and attacked my grandpa, and my grandpa killed the guy with a hammer. I'm like, what the fuck? I hardly remember my grandpa. I remember he lived really long. I remember he had a lot of hair. He used to get a haircut twice a month when he was like 99 years old. He died in his sleep. And, but yeah, some dude, crazy dude, because this was in Harlem, came into the subway and like was flashing a knife, and they're like, Grandpa killed this motherfucker with a hammer right between the eyes. Bow. But it was in self-defense. So my dad was a crazy side. My dad didn't talk much about, I got stories about my dad. I found out later. For sure, my dad was deep in that life that everybody raps about. But my mom took me away when I was like 2 years old. And so I went and lived with my grandma and grandpa. Totally. My mom was like, they weren't wealthy, but my mom's side was super intellectual. My grandpa was a professor at Yale. He was kind of a child prodigy. He's famous now. If you Google Martin Birkenrode, there's somebody made a Wikipedia, not me. He was he almost won a Nobel Prize. He was an astrophysicist. When he was young, he was one of the most famous marine biologists. So he helped open Scripps Institute after Yale. And then he worked for the United Nations. My mom was born Panama, even though they're not Spanish. And then he became an astrophysicist. I remember him. And it was good influence in a certain sense. My dad was in prison. My mom went back to live at home. They were well off enough that you didn't have to worry about food. They weren't wealthy. They weren't business people, but they had enough. My grandma's old school, Berlin, Germany. But my grandma said we used to be rich, but when she was a little girl, the Americans in 1940s bombed. She's like, it took all our wealth away, because my grandma's side was Prussian. If you know what Prussian is, that's like the upper class of Germany. But America came with this crazy Dresden fire bombings and the bombing of Berlin. And my grandma's like, we used to have 10 Steinways, Picassos. It all got destroyed in one huge conflagration, this fire. Yeah. So my grandma, I got to grow up around intellectuals as a young age, a big effect on me, I think. It's where I learned to, read, and that mom side kind of counteracted my dad's side, which was more like street. So I kind of grew up like half street kid and half intellectual, which I think is part of why I'm kind of controversial. Like my dad was like fucking Lambos and hot women. That's like my dad's side. He's like, fuck that. I'm from Harlem. He's like, you make money, you live that life, but I also like books. So I think I scrambled the world's brain. Everybody's like, oh, Ty doesn't really read. Or all the intellectuals were like, oh, I like, Tim Ferriss better or whatever. Because all the San Francisco people are like, oh, they just fucking talk about money and entrepreneurship. So I guess I'm a weird one for that. But that's good. I like to be weird, man. Like Robert Frost said, there was two paths that met in the woods, and I took the path less trod upon, and it's made all the difference in life. And so, yeah.
That's awesome.